Hello, my name is Jessica. I want to tell you something very real, something that changed my life. This is my story, and by the end of it, you will understand why you must talk in English. Not just learn it, not just listen to it, but talking it out loud every single day. My name is Jessica, and for a long time, my biggest secret was this. I was afraid to speak English. I mean truly afraid. Not just shy, not just unsure. I was terrified that the moment I opened my mouth, I would sound stupid. That people would laugh. That someone would say, "You can't speak English at your age." And so I made a choice, though I never said it out loud. I chose silence. It didn't start all at once. In school, when the English teacher asked questions, I would look away or pretend to write something. I always knew the answers. They were in my head somewhere. But I could never bring myself to raise my hand. My lips would tighten. My heart would beat faster. I wanted to disappear. And sometimes that worked. The teacher would move on. The class would continue. And I would stay safe. But that safety, it was like living inside a box with no windows. When I started working in an office, the same fear followed me. My job didn't require fluent English, so I managed with simple words, smiles, nods, short replies. Yes. Okay, I see. Those words became my shield. People spoke around me and I listened, smiled, pretended to understand everything even when I didn't. There were meetings where everyone shared ideas, but I never said a word. I had thoughts, good ones even, but I was too scared to say them out loud. I told myself it's better to stay quiet than to say something wrong. At lunch, my coworkers would chat in English. I sat with them but stayed quiet, laughing when they laughed, hoping they wouldn't notice my silence. They were kind people, but I felt like I was on the outside, like I was wearing a glass mask. Everyone could see me, but no one really heard me. Sometimes when they spoke too fast, I felt like I was drowning. Words flew around me like birds, and I stood there with a broken net trying to catch even one sentence. I remember one afternoon when a client from another country visited our office. My boss came to my desk and said, "Jessica, can you explain the report to Mr. Allen?" I froze. I looked at him trying to think of something to say, anything. But my mouth was dry, my voice trapped somewhere inside me. I shook my head and said, "Maybe someone else can do it better." My boss nodded, surprised but not angry. He asked someone else. The moment passed, but the feeling stayed. That one moment haunted me for weeks. Later that night, I sat in my room thinking about what had happened. I stared at the ceiling trying to understand why I had said no. I knew the report better than anyone. I had spent hours on it. But the moment English entered the picture, I gave up. I told myself I wasn't ready. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was scared. Not of the report, not of Mr. Allen, but of my own voice. And that fear had followed me everywhere. I didn't order food in English restaurants. I didn't ask for help at stores if the staff spoke English. Once I needed directions in the city and a tourist asked me something in English. I wanted to help, but I just pointed in a direction and smiled awkwardly. I walked away quickly, feeling ashamed. The person was kind, but I felt like I had failed at something simple. Just a few words could have made a difference, but I didn't say them. At home, I would sometimes try to read English books or watch English shows with subtitles. I understood some things, missed many others. I admired the people on screen who spoke smoothly, with confidence, like the language was part of their soul. I wished I could be like them. I wished I could say things without fear, without freezing, without checking every word in my head 10 times before speaking. One weekend, I attended a birthday party of a friend. There were many people there, some I knew, some I didn't. I stood by the corner, holding my drink, smiling at jokes I half understood. A girl beside me, maybe my age, turned and said, "Hey, I'm Lily. How do you know the birthday girl? I panicked. I knew what she asked. I had the answer, but my brain went blank. I smiled and said, "Friend," then nodded and looked away. Lily gave me a soft smile, maybe sensing my discomfort, and moved on. And there I was again, alone in a room full of people, silent when I didn't want to be. That night, I cried. I sat on the floor of my room, knees to my chest, and cried like a child. Not because someone was mean to me, not because I was hurt, but because I felt invisible. And worse, I had made myself invisible. Every time I stayed quiet, I was choosing that feeling. Every time I refused to speak, I was giving up a small part of my life. I started thinking about all the things I missed. The chances I didn't take, the conversations I avoided, the friends I never made, and the person I could have been if only I had spoken. It was a hard night, one of those nights that stays with you for a long time. But it was also the night something changed. I looked at myself in the mirror with red eyes and a tired face and whispered, "This has to stop." I didn't know how, but I knew I had to start somewhere. I couldn't keep waiting for a perfect moment. I couldn't keep hiding behind silence. I looked around my room, searching for something, anything that would help. My eyes landed on a sticky note I had put on my mirror months ago. It said, "You are stronger than you think." I had written it during a tough week, but I had forgotten it was even there. That night, those 6 words felt like a message from another version of me, a braver version. So, I made a small decision. I would say one sentence in English, just one out loud. Even if no one was there. Even if it sounded wrong, I would still say it. I stood up, looked in the mirror, and said slowly, "You can do this." It felt strange. My voice sounded unsure, but I didn't stop. I said it again. "You can do this." And again. "You can do this." Each time, my voice got a little louder. Much. But enough to make me feel like something was moving. Inside me, some frozen part of me was beginning to melt. I walked to the window and looked outside. The street was quiet. The trees stood still. The world felt peaceful. And in that quiet moment, I said a new sentence. I want to learn. It was small, simple, but it was mine. From that night on, I decided I wouldn't let fear control me anymore. I didn't know all the words. I didn't have perfect grammar, but I had a voice and I was going to use it. So, I started the next morning in the smallest way. That morning, something inside me was different. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like a soft light had been turned on inside me. The night before, when I said those small English sentences to the mirror, "You can do this and I want to learn," I had taken the first step and now I wanted to keep going. I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. The sunlight was coming through the window and my little plant on the shelf looked fresh and green. I poured myself a glass of water and whispered, "This is water." My voice was soft, but the words came out. "I am drinking water," I said again, this time a little louder. I didn't care if it sounded too simple. That wasn't the point. The point was I was finally using English with my own mouth, not in my head, not in a notebook, but in real life. That day, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't just learn English, I would live it. And to live it, I had to use it in the real world every day. So I looked around my house and began to speak. I said, "This is a chair." I pointed and said, "This is the table." I picked up my phone and said, "This is my phone. I use it every day." At first, it felt strange, but it also felt kind of fun, like I was discovering a new way to talk to the world around me. I didn't wait for big sentences or difficult words. I stuck to what I knew. Simple things, everyday things. I am washing my hands. I am opening the fridge. The milk is cold. I am brushing my teeth. Every action had a sentence. Every little thing became a moment to practice. I didn't need a classroom. My home became my learning space. I remember that evening I sat at my small desk and wrote down a list of the things I did every day. Wake up, brush teeth, make tea, get dressed, go to work, eat lunch, come home, watch TV, go to sleep. Next to each action, I wrote a small English sentence. I wake up at 7. I brush my teeth with cold water. I drink tea in the morning. These were not perfect sentences, but they were real. They were mine. That list became my daily script. And every morning before work, I would speak those sentences out loud. It didn't take long before I started to notice something. The more I spoke English, the more I heard English around me. Not because people suddenly started speaking more English, but because my ears were finally paying attention. On the bus, I would hear someone say, "I forgot my bag." At the grocery store, I'd hear, "Do you want a receipt?" On the street, people passed by saying things like, "See you later." These sentences, once just background noise, now felt like pieces of a puzzle I could understand. And slowly, I started repeating them, not to the people, but to myself. If I heard someone say, "That's a good idea," I would whisper it to myself. "That's a good idea." I liked how it sounded. I liked how it felt in my mouth. I wanted to make English a normal part of my thinking. At work, I started to speak to myself in English, quietly, of course. When I opened my email, I'd say, "I am checking my email." When I filed a report, I said, "I am writing the report." Even when I walked to the printer, I said in my head, "I am going to the printer." No one knew I was doing this, but inside something big was happening. I was no longer waiting for the right time to practice. I was creating it. One day, I was walking home and it started to rain. I didn't have an umbrella. My first thought was, "Oh no, it's raining," but not in my native language. I said it in English, and when I realized that, I smiled. That moment, soaked in the rain, I felt proud, because I knew my brain was beginning to think in English, even without trying. Later, I began adding English labels to things around my house. On the fridge, I stuck a note, "Fridge." On my closet, "Clothes." On the mirror, "Face." My room looked like a small language museum. Anyone visiting might have laughed, but to me it was serious. Every time I saw those labels, I would read them out loud. "This is my fridge. It keeps food cold. These are my clothes. I wear them to work." It became a routine, and slowly the words stuck. I didn't need to translate them in my head anymore. I also started keeping a small notebook with me even at work. If I heard a new word or sentence, I would write it down. Then during my lunch break or while riding the bus, I would say the word out loud and make a simple sentence with it. For example, one day I heard the word deadline. I wrote it down. Later I said to myself, "My project has a deadline." Another time, I heard someone say, "I'm in a hurry." I practiced it again and again. I am in a hurry. I am in a hurry. I even said it while walking fast just to feel the meaning. At night, before going to sleep, I would sit on my bed and talk to myself. I would say, "Today I went to work. I wrote 2 emails. I talked to my friend. I ate lunch." It was like telling a bedtime story to myself, but in English. I didn't use big words. I didn't worry about being perfect. I just wanted to speak, and it felt good. For the first time in my life, I felt like English was not something I was chasing. It was something that was slowly becoming a part of me. There were still days when I felt unsure. Some words were hard to pronounce. Some sentences didn't sound right. But I kept reminding myself, I don't have to be perfect. I just have to keep going. And so I did. Every day I chose to speak a little more. One day I counted. I had spoken more than 100 English sentences just during my normal day. That made me smile. I also noticed changes in my confidence. I stood taller. I felt braver. When someone spoke English near me, I didn't shrink away. I listened. I understood. And sometimes I even replied, not with long answers, but with something, a few words, a small sentence, enough to join the moment. And that's when something new began to happen. I started enjoying it. I started enjoying the sound of English, the rhythm of the words, the feeling of saying something and knowing what it meant. I would walk down the street and talk to myself quietly. I am going to the store. The weather is nice today. I need to buy apples. People probably thought I was just humming or daydreaming. But really, I was training my voice. I was building my habit. This habit, though simple, became the turning point in my journey because it changed the way I saw English. It was no longer a subject in school. It was not something only smart people used. It was not something I had to fear. It was just another way to talk. And talking, I realized, was something I wanted to do. Eventually, I reached a point where I didn't have to force myself to speak English. I wanted to. It became natural. It became part of my morning. It became part of my routine. And more than anything, it became part of me. And that's when I knew I was ready for something bigger, something a little scarier, something that would push me even more. After many days of practicing small English sentences during my daily life, pointing at things, saying simple thoughts out loud, and making English a part of my routine, something inside me began to shift. The fear that used to live in my chest, the fear that told me not to speak, was no longer shouting. It was still there, like a quiet shadow behind me. But now I could walk forward without it holding me back. I was speaking more each day. Not big speeches, not deep conversations, but I was speaking, and that meant everything to me. One evening after work, I came home tired but peaceful. I had practiced more English that day than ever before. I had described almost everything I did in English, even small things like I'm locking the door or I am heating my food. I felt proud of myself. I was beginning to feel like English wasn't just something I practiced. It was becoming my second voice. But deep inside, I still knew something was missing. I was speaking about my actions. I was talking to things around me, but I hadn't yet talked to myself. I hadn't looked into my own eyes and spoken freely like I would to a friend. I hadn't used English to express what I felt, not just what I did. And so that night, I stood in front of my mirror. At first, I didn't speak. I just looked at my reflection. I saw the same face I saw every day. The tired eyes, the slightly nervous smile, the woman who had spent so many years afraid of her own voice. But now she was different. She had started to speak. She had started to believe. I took a breath and said, "Hi, Jessica." It felt strange. My voice sounded unsure, like I was pretending, but I kept going. "I want to talk to you in English." I paused. My eyes blinked back at me, uncertain but curious. And slowly I began to speak. "I went to work today. I felt tired, but I finished all my tasks. My boss smiled at me. That made me feel good. Each word came slowly, like stepping on stones in a river. Careful, measured, but each one landed. I looked into my own eyes and told myself about my day. Then I said, I am proud of you. It was quiet in the room, but in that silence, something powerful happened. For the first time, I wasn't just saying English. I was feeling it. I was using it to connect, not to impress someone, not to pass a test, but to be honest with myself. Every night after that, I returned to the mirror. It became my new habit. I didn't just say what I did that day. I started sharing how I felt. I said things like, I was nervous in the meeting, or I wanted to speak, but I was too quiet, or even, I laughed with my coworker today and it made me feel happy. I was learning more than language. I was learning confidence. At first, I only spoke for 2 or 3 minutes, but slowly the time grew. 5 minutes, then 10, then 15. It didn't feel like practice anymore. It felt like healing. I had spent so many years hiding my voice, but now I was finally letting it breathe. One night, I decided to pretend I was in a job interview. I had seen videos online of common interview questions. So I stood in front of the mirror and said, "Tell me about yourself." Then I answered in English. My name is Jessica. I live in the city. I work in an office. I like learning English. I smiled. I sounded a bit stiff, but I did it. So I tried again. I'm Jessica. I work hard and I enjoy helping people. I'm learning English because I want to grow. That night, I pretended to answer 5 more questions. What are your strengths? What do you like to do in your free time? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I didn't have all the right vocabulary, but I said what I could. I paused, I thought, and I spoke. And when I didn't know a word, I found another way to say what I meant. That became my new mirror routine. I would play roles. Some nights I was in a job interview. Other nights I pretended I was meeting a new friend. Hi, nice to meet you. My name is Jessica. Or I love books. What about you? Sometimes I was a tour guide. This is my room. Here is my desk. I study English here. It was fun. It was silly. And it worked. I noticed something else too. My voice was changing. It was getting stronger. My English was clearer. I stopped whispering and started speaking with more energy. I was not just talking. I was performing with a smile, with emotion, with real feeling. And as I spoke more, I began to feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. I was proud of the girl who used to sit in the back of the class and say nothing. I was proud of the woman who had said no to a client meeting because she was afraid. Because now that same woman stood in front of her mirror and spoke English for 15 minutes straight with no fear, no shame, and no one telling her she wasn't good enough. That confidence didn't stay in the mirror. It followed me into my day. One morning, I walked into work and my coworker Jason said, "Good morning, Jessica." Without even thinking, I smiled and said, "Good morning, Jason. How are you today?" It was a simple exchange, but it was different because for the first time, my words came naturally. I didn't pause. I didn't check the sentence in my mind first. It just came out like it belonged to me. Later at lunch, I joined a group conversation. Usually, I would just listen. This time, when someone asked, "What did you all do over the weekend?" I answered. I went to the park, I said. I walked for 1 hour. The weather was very nice. Everyone smiled. One person said, "That sounds lovely." And just like that, I was part of the moment. And every night, I thanked my mirror. Not with words, but with my time. I continued talking to myself. I practiced small talks, opinions, stories from my childhood. I even practiced describing things around me in detail. This is my favorite mug. It's blue. I got it last year. It makes me feel calm. I spoke about my fears, too. I still get nervous when someone speaks fast. Sometimes I don't understand, but I am learning. I am improving. That kind of honesty gave me power. The mirror helped me be free. I could be anyone I wanted to be. I could make mistakes and no one would laugh. I could pause and try again. I could say something 10 times until it felt right. And through all of it, I was becoming someone I liked, someone brave. I also began recording myself just with my phone. At first, I hated the sound of my voice. I thought I sounded strange, but I kept doing it. I would talk for 1 minute, then listen. It helped me notice the words I said too fast or too softly. I would try again and then again. After a week, I could hear the difference. I was clearer, more natural. I even started to smile while speaking. My voice had warmth now. It had life. Every step I took with the mirror gave me more courage for the world outside it. Because I was no longer just talking about objects or daily actions. I was talking about me, my thoughts, my feelings, my life in English. And that made me feel capable. That made me feel ready. Ready for something even bigger. I was ready to try speaking English with real people. Not just coworkers, not just friendly greetings, but real complete conversations. Even if I made mistakes, even if I forgot words, even if my heart beat fast again. I was ready to talk to my reflection, not just about actions, but about feelings, dreams, and stories. I was ready to have real conversations with myself in English. After so many nights talking to myself in the mirror, pretending to be in conversations, answering imaginary questions, and even recording my own voice, something inside me had changed. I could feel it not only in my voice, but in the way I moved, the way I smiled, and the way I thought about myself. Speaking English no longer felt like a dream far away. It was becoming a real part of me. Still, I knew the mirror was just the beginning. Practicing alone helped me build confidence. But if I truly wanted to grow, I had to step outside of that comfort zone. I had to speak English with real people. Even if I made mistakes, even if I felt nervous, even if my voice shook. The first real test came sooner than I expected. It was a Monday morning and I had arrived at work a little earlier than usual. I was putting my lunch in the staff fridge when a new coworker walked in. She smiled and said, "Hi, I'm Amanda. I just joined last week." I paused. In the past, I would have smiled politely, maybe said hello softly, and walked away. But that day, I remembered how many times I had practiced this moment in front of the mirror. I had already introduced myself 100 times there. Now it was time to do it in real life. I smiled back and said, "Hi, Amanda. I'm Jessica. Welcome to the team." I could hear my voice. It wasn't as shaky as I thought it would be. She replied with a cheerful, "Nice to meet you," and we talked for a few more seconds. Nothing long, nothing complicated. But when I walked back to my desk, I felt like I had just climbed a mountain. I was smiling to myself the whole time. It had happened. I had spoken English with a real person. That evening, I sat in front of my mirror again, like always. But this time, I didn't pretend. I told myself the truth. Today I spoke in English at work. I was nervous, but I did it. I am proud. After that, I began to look for more moments to use English in the real world. Not big moments, just little ones that came naturally. At the grocery store, instead of just pointing at items, I started saying, "Can I have this one, please?" At the coffee shop, I forced myself to say, "I'd like a small coffee. No sugar." Sometimes I would hear my voice and feel a little embarrassed. I still worried about saying something wrong. But each time I spoke, the fear inside me grew smaller. One day, something unexpected happened. I was walking in the park near my home when I saw a couple looking lost. The woman was holding her phone and pointing in different directions. They looked at each other, unsure. I slowed down as I passed them, and then I heard the woman say, "Do you know where the museum is?" She was clearly a tourist. Her accent told me she wasn't from here. I stopped walking. For a second, my old fear returned. I wanted to smile and keep walking. That would have been easier. But then I remembered the hours I had spent practicing sentences just like this. I remembered standing in front of my mirror saying, "Turn left or go straight and then right." This was the moment I had been preparing for. I turned back to her and said, "Yes, the museum is near. You go straight, then turn left at the second light. It's on the right side." She smiled wide and said, "Thank you so much." I nodded, smiled back, and walked on. But inside I was dancing. I wanted to laugh, cry, and cheer all at the same time. It was such a small conversation, just one sentence. But I had done it. I had helped someone using English, and that felt powerful. But not every moment was perfect. There were mistakes, many of them. I remember one day at work, I had to explain a report to my manager. He asked, "Can you give me a quick summary in English?" I froze for a second. Then I said, "Yes, I try." As I began speaking, I forgot a word I really needed. I said something like, "We collect all the number things data." I laughed a little at myself, and my manager smiled and nodded kindly. "Yes, the data," he said. I continued mixing past tense and present tense in a mess, but I finished the explanation. I felt a little embarrassed afterward. I thought, why did I say number things? Why didn't I just say data right away? But later I realized something important. Even though I didn't speak perfectly, he understood me. I had done my job. And even better, he didn't laugh at me. He helped. That made me feel safer. Making mistakes used to scare me, but now they became part of the journey. Another time, I tried joining a conversation at lunch. Two coworkers were talking about movies. I jumped in and said, "I saw that movie too. It's so funny. The actor he is good acting." One of them gently corrected me. "Oh yeah. He's a great actor." I smiled and repeated, "Yes, great actor. Thank you." I knew I had made a mistake, but I didn't feel ashamed. I felt supported. I was learning and they were helping. I started to understand that the only way to grow was to try, even if I made mistakes in front of people. I also started joining a small English speaking group online. It was free and open to anyone learning English. The first time I joined, my hands were sweating. My voice shook when I introduced myself. "Hi, I'm Jessica. I'm from." I paused, took a breath, and said, "I'm from here." I smiled nervously. The people in the group smiled back. Some of them also made small mistakes. Some spoke slowly. It felt like home. We practiced talking about different topics: hobbies, food, travel, work. Some people had strong accents. Some had limited vocabulary. But we all encouraged each other. We laughed when things sounded funny. We helped when someone forgot a word. The fear I had lived with for years began to disappear. I realized I was not alone. Sometimes after these sessions, I would feel so proud that I would go to the mirror and say, "You did it again, Jessica. You spoke. You didn't give up. Little by little, I stopped caring so much about mistakes. Instead, I started to care more about connection, about being understood, about making friends, about being part of the world. I started having short conversations with my neighbors in English. I even helped my niece with her English homework. I still didn't have perfect grammar. I still forgot words, but I didn't stop. I didn't hide anymore. One of the biggest moments came when my boss sent me an email. It said, "Jessica, I've noticed your English has improved a lot. Would you be interested in helping with a few client meetings next month?" My heart skipped a beat. The old Jessica would have said no. The old Jessica would have made an excuse. But the new me, I replied, "Yes, I would like to try." When the day came for that meeting, I was nervous but ready. I had practiced introducing myself. I had written down key words. I had talked to myself in the mirror the night before, and when I sat in that meeting room and spoke to the client, I used everything I had learned. I made a few mistakes, of course. I said, "We is working on the plan," and quickly corrected myself. "Sorry, we are working on the plan." The client smiled and nodded. He understood. No one stopped me. No one made me feel small. When the meeting ended, my boss looked at me and said, "Great job." I walked out of that room feeling taller than ever before. Now, when I think about my journey, I don't only remember the sentences I said correctly. I remember the mistakes, too, because they were part of the path. They were not failures. They were signs that I was brave enough to try. Speaking English with real people showed me that fluency doesn't mean perfection. It means communication. It means courage. It means trying again, even when your voice shakes. And now I was ready for something even deeper. After I started speaking English with real people, even when I made mistakes, my world began to feel bigger. It was like living in a house where I had kept most of the doors shut for years. Suddenly, one by one, I began opening those doors. And behind each one, I found a new experience, a new connection, and sometimes even a new part of myself. It didn't happen all at once, and I didn't always notice right away. But now looking back, I can clearly see how talking and English changed not only how I spoke, but how I lived. The first door opened not in a physical place, but in my heart. I no longer felt small when I walked into a room full of English speakers. I no longer shrank into the corners of meetings, hoping no one would ask me anything. I used to dread team-building activities at work because I was always afraid they would involve speaking. But now I joined freely. I still felt nervous sometimes, but that nervousness didn't stop me anymore. It became a part of the excitement. I wasn't just speaking English. I was showing up for my life in a new way. It was during one of these work events, group lunch at a nearby restaurant, that I realized just how far I had come. We were seated at a long table, about 10 of us, and as we ordered our food, people began chatting. One colleague mentioned her weekend trip to a hiking trail. And suddenly, we were all sharing stories about our favorite places to go on weekends. I jumped in without planning to and said, "I usually go to the botanical garden on Sunday. I like the quiet." Everyone looked at me and smiled. One person said, "Oh, really? I've been there, too. It's beautiful." Another said, "Jessica, you've never mentioned that before. That sounds lovely." And just like that, I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I was part of the moment, and something even more surprising happened. After lunch, a coworker asked if I wanted to join a small book club they were starting at the office. "We read simple English books, nothing too serious," she said. "Just for fun." Old me would have said maybe next time. But new me, I said yes, I'd love to try. That was the next door English opened for me, books. I had always wanted to read English novels, but I never had the courage. I worried I wouldn't understand them. But being invited to a book club gave me a reason to try. I started with short novels meant for young readers. I kept a dictionary nearby, but I didn't stop to look up every word. I just read for the feeling, for the story. And slowly, I began to fall in love with reading again. But this time in a new language. Reading gave me new vocabulary, but more importantly, it gave me new thoughts. I began to dream in English.